So now please let me shortly introduce to you Life Against Death and Lost Body, and then I will continue reading the introduction of the Challenge of Islam, and later the table of contents and some fragments of the book. The intention here is to hopefully giving ourselves a chance to add to our imagination new material about Islam. At best, we will be able, together with all similar attempts, to establish a public imagination that might help us in our journey to know more of our knowledge. So I have to tell you, Norman Brown was based in Boston. He was teaching all over US. He was very influential in the 50s. He wrote the book Life Against Death that became a fashionable book to carry throughout May 68 and all the student movements in the United States. And actually what he was looking for to open up all these different way of thinking about all these subjects, he realized his Life Against Death, the psychoanalytic understanding of the history, has become too influential that he tried to write another book short after the first one, Lost Body, which is all unrelated fragments, are so confusing, and well, he really succeeded and he undid all the follower finding of the first book. So I just give you an example of 3 paragraphs from Lost Body. First, I will read you the table of contents just to see how he is dealing with the book in Lost Body, and then I will read you the back cover of the Challenge of Islam, and then the table of contents of that book as well. So the book says Lost Body by the author of Life Against Death, Norman Brown, which is written in, the copyright is 1966 of this edition. And we will see liberty, nature, trinity, unity, person, representative, head, boundary, food, fire, fraction, resurrection, fulfillment, judgment, freedom, nothing. And then one part of the book, he says, and I have to tell you, every paragraph has its own reference. He doesn't write one chapter with all the, every fragment has its own reference, and then he moves on to another subject totally unrelated to the one he has written in the last paragraph. To know the reality of politics, we have to believe the myth, to believe what we were told as children. Roman history is the story of the brothers Romulus and Remus, the sons of the she-wolf, leaders of gangs of juvenile delinquents, who achieved the rape of the Sabine women, and whose festival is the Lupercalia, at which youth, naked except for girdles made from the skins of victims, ran wild through the city, striking those whom they met, especially women, with strips of goat skin, a season fit for king killing. Julius Caesar, Act 1. Find the true fire, of which the fires of war are a satanic parody. Fight fire with fire. The true teachers of peace are those who have the highest power, who can work miracles, who are masters of fire. Therefore, the Buddhas are called jinas, conquerors, candles of vision, foundations of Tibetan mysticism. The thing then is not to abolish war, but to find the true war. Open the hidden heart in wars of mutual benevolence, wars of love. Blake, Jerusalem. During the 1980s, Norman Brown gave a series of prophetic, inventive, and wide-ranging lectures on Islam called The Challenge of Islam, the prophetic tradition. The lectures speak to Islam's relation to and revision of the Christian tradition, the literary innovation of the Quran, the nature of revolutionary political Islam, and the vision of a world civilization. The reader will find in the lectures and education on the Sunni-Shia split, as well as a crucial alternative to the division clash of civilizations, view of the relation between Muslims and the West. Brown's more historical perspective shows how Islam is part of the West's tradition, how it corresponds to unifying the strands of early Judeo-Christian doctrine, and how it exemplifies broad themes concerning the place of art and the imagination in human life. Norman O. Brown Owen, table of contents says the introduction and Lecture 1, Universal History with Cosmopolitan Intent, Lecture 2, Islam and Judaism, Lecture 3, Islam and Christianity, Docetism, Lecture 4, the Book, Lecture 5, the Succession, Sunni and Shia, Lecture 6, Revolutionary Islam, Lecture 7, Mystic Islam, the Essential Books, and the appendix is Shia Islam, the Politics of Gnosticism. Introduction. Norman O. Brown's lecture on Islam were first given at Santa Cruz in 1980 and then at Tufts in 1981, which occasion provides the basis of the version. It may seem to some that Islam was an unlikely subject for Brown, whose most famous works before these lectures both embodied and advocated a mind able to unriddle the constant production of symbols that he believed culture and politics everywhere produced, symbols that speak of humanity's deepest yearnings and our drive towards self-destruction. For him, the book of these symbols, history itself, told a story that would end one way or another in unity, the deathly unity of a holocaust of fire, or the one body of a humanity deeply linked by eros. This liberated eros, he famously argued, would require a polymorphous body consciousness, one open to a playful, pleasurable relationship to other bodies and to the world. What then could Islam, which may at first seem so dour, unerotic, and exacting, offer? But from another point of view, how could it not attend to this volume of the symbolic productions of humanity, and particularly as Islam too embodied desire for a singular, a united world civilization? Brown was always omnivorous in curiosity, alert to the history of his time, the fall of the Shah, the rise of the Shia theocracy in Iran, more or less at the time of these lectures, and particularly attentive to what was reviled and repressed within his time and place's account. It may take probably 45 minutes for me to review the parts, probably a bit less, hopefully. Lecture 1, Universal History with Cosmopolitan Intent. This is another experiment in the study of history, and I should make it very clear at the outset, this is not an experiment by a specialist either in history as a whole or in Islam. I'm strictly an amateur, or if you like, in academic terms, a specialist perhaps in general education. I would like to think of what I'm going to try to do in these lectures as an experiment in the study of history and an experiment in general education, which I interpret to be essentially a matter of relating the present to the past, the present to our past cultural tradition, so that we can see current events in the light of universal history and become something like that informed citizenry which the founding fathers deemed essential to the survival of this republic. And it starts, therefore, with just as it were doing my homework on Islam. And I think I can show you that you can do your homework on Islam. The stakes are high. Islam is an alternative interpretation of our tradition. And an interpretation of the tradition is itself a venture, a bet, a venture on how we are to conduct our present and our future. And more, thinking of those streams and west and east, the plot thickens, I think. Think of Islam in its particular geographical matrix where it came into being. Its Arabian, Transjordanian matrix in the 7th century AD, beyond Jordan, Arabia in the 7th AD. At that time, Islam or Arabia was at the intersection, or both the margin and intersection, of two superannuated empires. The Roman Empire in the west, the Persian or Parthian or at that time Sasanian Empire in the east. So that starting with concern with the relation of present events to past traditions, the study of Islam is moving my mind into a more ample and a more generous notion of the space in which history takes place, and liberating me from the prison house, the mental prison house of Western civilization, not only getting out of the spatial framework of Western civilization. I think another thing that has happened or is happening to me, or I want to see what you think of it, the study of Islam is getting me out of the traditional chronological framework on which every good classics professor hangs his world history. I mean, the well-known conventional framework, ancient, medieval, modern, the particular chronological backbone or linear line, the conventional baggage of any classics professor teaching general education, courses on Western civilization, and that's what I want to re-examine or undermine in my mind, in yours now. The unit of our history is not Western civilization, but civilization. World history with cosmopolitan intent. That bizarre notation on the posters advertising this occasion, some of you may not know that that is simply a citation of one of the major works of the great philosopher Immanuel Kant. I mean, you can be a prophetic philosopher. See Immanuel Kant. World history with cosmopolitan intent is not the history of Western civilization, but the history of civilization. And it begins in the ancient Near East. Again, geography does matter. The Fertile Crescent, the Nile to Oxus. Oxus? Yes, Oxus. Look it up. Heartland. And Western civilization, including the Greek, I think, can better be seen as a spin-off, a derivative of Western expansion. First to the Mediterranean Greco-Roman civilization, then to Western Europe, and then to America and Medford. Western expansion should be seen as a spin-off of a derivative civilization. Modifications, mutations in a pattern whose fundamental outline was laid down in the ancient Oriental urban empires. And we do not understand the ground plan of our civilization unless we understand those ancient Orient urban empires. Aristotle says that man is by nature political. The word polis is the word city. Man is by nature civilized or made for city life. I think the prophetic tradition, and I think it's right, rejects that notion that man is by nature political or a civilized animal. The city is not natural. It is not by nature. The silhouette of the city, whether on the Nile or the Euphrates or the Charles River, is a visible contradiction of nature, a visible declaration of its supernatural pretensions. More specifically, the city does not arise out of natural human need. Here, Plato is a better guide than Aristotle. Here and always Plato is a better guide than Aristotle. Plato is certainly touched with the bread of prophecy. Cities do not begin at the level of the division of labor based on natural need, natural human needs. On the contrary, you remember in the construction of the city in Plato's Republic, cities, in the true sense of the word, begin only at the level of luxury. That is to say, the city is a free creation in the realm of the superfluous, I mean economically superfluous. It is a free creation of the human spirit, not doing something that comes naturally. And it is made in economy terms, I think. The city is a free creation in the realm of the superfluous, and it is made out of economic surplus. As I say, the thing to watch, particularly when thinking of the fundamental nature of the city, I think, is the divorce of mental from manual labor. That urban revolution of 3,000 years BC was a managerial revolution. I mean, those who do not use their hands are management, and management is a problem. I think that is still with us. It is a problem even under socialism. In the prophetic tradition, the city as a theocratic structure is idolatrous, the worship of false gods, and the prophetic call is to institute a true theocracy, to find another God, who is the true God. And in that spirit, the Islamic Shahada, the fundamental declaration of faith, says, there is no God but God. And on that basis, the prophetic tradition generates social criticism and social programs, not based on godless atheism, but on a transcendent God. And so I end with a vision of two kinds of social criticism alive in the world today: Marxism and Islam. Two still revolutionary forces. Two tired, old revolutionary forces, neither of them doing very well. But it would be a mistake to take any comfort from their failure. The human race is at stake. And they both, Marxism and Islam, would agree on one proposition. There will be one world, or there will be none. Lecture 2, Islam and Judaism. The study of Islam, to understand the prophetic tradition, to understand Judaism and Christianity better, to see perhaps Islam as the first Protestant Reformation. The first Protestant Reformation. Now, if you were to see Islam as the first Protestant Reformation, what would it mean? It would mean, I think, to pass a judgment that something had gone wrong. That something else had to be tried. Something had gone wrong as early as the 7th century AD, the 7th century of the Christian. If we want to understand the difference between Islam and Orthodox Christianity, well, this is lecture 3, Islam and Christianity. If we want to understand the difference between Islam and Orthodox Christianity, as I was already coming to last time, Orthodox Christianity has to be identified with crucifixion and docetism. You can see, if your imagination is going, one meaning immediately becomes apparent. Docetism says it did not really happen, it only seemed so. It was a mere appearance, and then in an anticipation of, oh, you know how popular that use of phantasm with PH, not with F. Fantasy is in psychoanalytical and post-psychoanalytical writings. In the first year of psychoanalytic studies, they asked the students not to use F for fantasy, but PH, to see the relationship between fantasy and phantasm. But already in the 1st century AD, Orthodox Christianity was using the word phantasm with PH to interpret what they thought the Docetists were saying. Now just stay with the denial of the crucifixion and the theological significance of that. Christianity is the crucifixion, and Islam is the denial. Jerome, an early father of the church, referring to this Docetic heresy, which is already attacked in our New Testament, it already existed in the earliest times. Jerome says as follows, quote, "The blood of Christ was still fresh in Judea when his body was said to be a mere phantasm," unquote. You see the use of the notion, our first knowledge, but inadequate knowledge, of the Gnostic heresy is to the attack on them in Orthodox theologians. And one Gnostic, as reported in Orthodox Christian polemics, says as follows, quote, "It was not Jesus who suffered. He had no real body, and so could not be held by his enemies, but was able, wherever he wished, to ascend to God. At the crucifixion, he stood by, invisible, and watched Simon of Cyrene crucified in his stead, and he laughed his cheated adversaries to scorn. When I perceive the ignorance and prejudice about Islam reflected in the public statements of the President of the United States, of course, 3 ex-presidents, and the Vice President of the United States, I mourn the failures of American education. These were in 1981 President Ronald Reagan, his Vice President and successor George H.W. Bush, father of George W. Bush, along with former Presidents Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and Jimmy Carter. They will not be corrected easily or overnight, and they cannot be corrected without painstaking attention to fundamentals, difficult fundamentals of theology, of Islam and Christianity, and Islam as a heretical outgrowth of the Judeo-Christian tradition. A definition that I think I gave you, Islam, a transformation of Arab soil, a Jewish religion that had itself been transformed by Gnostic Judeo-Christianity. Gnostic Judeo-Christianity is my topic. Christian heresy, an alternative possibility in Christianity, so that through Islam I am trying to arrive at a better understanding of Christianity, particularly a recovery of some lost opportunities in it. Christian heresy, broadly labeled Gnosticism. There are 2 words, only 2 hard words, but please let me try to teach you them. Gnosticism and Docetism. Actually, there is not much to be done with, and if you look up in the encyclopedia, you will see there is not much light can be generated by looking at what they say under the heading of Gnosticism. Perhaps there is one clue in the word Gnosticism. Gnosis. Gnosticism. Gnosis. Can you see that it is the same word? It's the Greek word that corresponds to knowing. 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 Knowledge. Ignoring what you find in the encyclopedia, there is one clue to this other Christianity in the word Gnosticism. And that is that religion for this heresy, for these heretics, is cognitive, is a matter of knowing something. It is a cognitive and not a sacramental matter. Now, use that loose and yet significant definition of Gnosticism, and I wonder if you can make the jump to see that anyone who has learned anything from psychoanalysis is Gnostic. If I had my book on Freud here, I could quote the master saying there is another reality, which is just as much unknown to us as the nature of outside reality. According to the latest discoveries of physics, outside reality is not given to us in immediate experience, but has to be probed with special faculties and special procedures. But Gnosticism, otherwise, I can't use much. The more interesting, and this is my subject for today, is Docetism. Again, the etymology of the Greek word is where we'll start. But first of all, the Catholic Encyclopedia. The Catholic Encyclopedia on Docetism, look it up. Quote, the theological error of those who deny the material reality of the body of Christ, end quote. And the great Anglican Encyclopedia, at the time when Anglicanism still produced encyclopedias, Hastings' Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, quote, the heresy which teaches that Christ had no material body and human nature, but only an apparent body, phantasm of humanity, end quote. Why on earth would anyone want to talk that way? And that's my assignment for this afternoon. If you listen to me carefully this afternoon, you will see, I hope, that only through Islam can we understand Christianity. Heretical Christianity. That's why I mentioned that. But in one of those Gnostic Gospels, You have Jesus speaking like this. Jesus is speaking in an original Gnostic text. Quote, "For my death, which they think happened, is that it says something just like the text of the Gnostic Gospel or Apocalypse that I just read. The Quran, Surah 4, 156 to 158, the Great. When we see the earnest Christian missionaries who are struggling to propagate their faith in Western Africa against the rival Islamic religion, the Christian efforts to come to terms with Islam. This is the great stumbling block to them. Surah 4, 156 to 158. I read that. For their unbelief and their uttering against Mary a mighty calumny, and for their saying, we slew the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, the messenger of God. Yet they did not slay him, nor did they crucify him. Only an appearance of that was shown to them. Those who are at variance concerning him surely are in doubt about him. They have no knowledge and only follow opinion. But they certainly did not kill him. No need. God raised him up to himself. God is almighty, all wise." What is the issue here? Jesus for Islam and for the Gnostic Christianity is certainly some kind of manifestation of God on earth. What they are denying is one of the slogans of Trinitarian Christianity in the early formative days of the church. God was crucified for us. What they are denying is God was crucified for us. Trinitarian Christianity takes God's incarnation as a historical fact, as a literal historical fact. What is at stake here is the meaning of history, God's operation in history. If, as Orthodox Trinitarian Christianity says, the crucifixion is not only a historical fact, but the decisive event of world history, then God takes charge of history. History is God's act, and God redeems us from that original sin. And all that is left to us, this is Orthodox, my reading of Orthodox incarnationist Christianity as seen from both agnostic Docetic and an Islamic point of view, all that is left to us is our personal salvation. History has been taken care of by the crucifixion and God's redemption of that fatal disaster on the cross. And we obtain our personal redemption, salvation, by belief in Him. That is to say, belief that this was a historical fact, and through sacraments which commemorate the historical fact. This belief in the historical fact is incarnationism. Gnostic Docetism, Docetism is an alternative to incarnationism. Jesus is a manifestation of God on earth, but not an incarnation. Jesus is a prophet, Muhammad is a prophet, and prophecy is the mode in which the divine and the human miraculously meet. In Gnostic Docetic theology and in Islam, it's up to the individual and it is ultimately subjective, and therefore there is a deep theological principle here for toleration and respect for individual differences. But that passage about the crucifixion that I'm working with, quote, they slew him not, nor did they crucify him. I'm giving you a variety of possible translations now. Quote, I'm giving you, they slew him not, nor did they crucify him, but it appeared so unto them, and lo, those who disagree concerning it are in doubt thereof. They have no knowledge thereof, save the pursuit of conjecture, end quote. Another translated, quote, it was caused to appear to them that way, end quote, quote. He was counterfeited for them, end quote. Or, quote, they have been caught in the trap of the assimilation committed by themselves, end quote. Or, quote, They have been caught in the trap of their own imagination, end quote. They saw talent, they saw him as they were able to see, and so much to the word, repeat, they saw talent, they saw him as they were able to see, and so much the worse for them. The crucifixion remains in Islam a mystery and a revelation, and we need the Gnostic Gospels to understand that. I mean, what do they do with crucifixion if you don't take it the way the Orthodox take it, as the historic moment when God saved history? The crucial text. Again, just as the Acts of Peter is crucial text on transfiguration here, we have from the old collection of apocryphal New Testament writings, the Acts of John, not the Gospels of John, but the Acts of John, another writing. And let me give you this. On the evening of Good Friday, the angel Christos, while the multitude below in Jerusalem imagines that it is crucifying him, causes the Apostle John to go up the Mount of Olives and into the grotto illumined by his presence. And there the angel reveals to John the mystery of the cross of light. This cross is called sometimes Word, sometimes Mind, sometimes Jesus, and sometimes Christ, sometimes Door, sometimes Way, sometimes Son, Father, Spirit, sometimes Life, and sometimes Truth. It separates the things on high that are from the things below that become. At the same time, being one, streams forth into all things. Jesus speaks, quote, "This is not the cross of wood which thou shalt see when thou goest down hence. Neither am I he that is on the cross, whom now thou seest not, but only hearest his voice. I was reckoned to be that which I am not, not being what I was unto myself, many others. Thou hearest that I suffered, yet I did not suffer, that I suffered not, yet did I suffer, that I was pierced, yet I was not smitten, hanged, and I was not hanged. That blood flowed from me, and it flowed not. And in a word, what they say of me, that befell me not, but what they say not, that did I suffer." End quote. Corban Divine Epiphany. Now, what is that? This is my meditation or extrapolation. The real cross is not the literal cross, but the cross of light. The cross of light, which is called sometimes Word, sometimes Truth, sometimes Door, etc. Or to put it another way, the crucifixion is not a historical event, but a suprahistorical reality, a metaphysical reality, not a historical but an eternal truth, a visionary truth. In eternity, all is vision. Or to use another metaphor, the crucifixion is not a literal but a symbolic truth. Or to put it another way, as I said in my book, Love's Body, there is no literal truth. Everything is only a symbol. And in any case, it all depends on what you make of it. Docetic Christology. Its notion of Jesus as, and this is the technical word they use, but you can see it, angelomorphic. This is the way they avoid the doctrine of the incarnation. He is an angelomorphic Christology. And in the Oran, Jesus is, well, the Oran is very beautiful in this respect. The Oran attributes some miracles to Jesus that we do not have in our New Testament. The Oran attributes to Jesus an angelic status and nature. And again, with majestic sublimity, Muhammad is absolutely clear in saying, quote, "I am not an angel," end quote. Muhammad says a number of times, quote, "I am not an angel," end quote. In the early Christianity, there is a great writer called Pseudo-Dionysius, who wrote about celestial hierarchies and has a world filled with the most magnificent angels. The Catholic Church, with their touching all bases the way they do, has kept in what the main line of Orthodox Catholic theology goes with Thomas Aquinas. Now Thomas Aquinas is to be defined as the philosopher who chose the Muslim philosopher Averroes over the Muslim philosopher Avicenna, Ibn Rushd and Ibn Sina. Angels are alive and well in Islam, but Islam has many houses, and by the 11th century AD there are two trends. This is all taken from my teacher Goethe, Henri Goethe. The book I referred to. In the 11th century, there are two trends in Muslim theology and philosophy. There is the Western trend in Spain, identified with Averroes, Ibn Rushd, and there is the Eastern trend, identified with Avicenna, Ibn Sina. And it is in Avicenna that the light mysticism and angelic hierarchies of pseudo-Dionysus are preserved, kept alive and integrated with Sufi artistic and religious experience. In the West, maybe. Can you see? I mean, can we see a pattern? The prophetic angel passes over into literature as it withers in the church, in Dante and in Blake. And Muhammad is the bridge between Christ and Dante and Blake. Muhammad is the bridge between Christ and Dante and Blake, and that's why I lecture on the subject, on the literature allspices. And as I said, he says he is not an angel. He is not like Christ. And he says in that magnificent gesture, quote, "My only miracle is the book," end quote, like James Joyce and a number of others could say. Lecture 4, the book. The only miracle, Muhammad said, the only miracle is the book. Milton, quote, "A good book is the precious lifeblood of a master spirit treasured up for a life beyond life." End quote. Muhammad's modernity, the illiterate prophet with a literary mind, and on that basis he did a different theology of the word. The Gospel of John, quote, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and all things were made by the Word," end quote. Only a miracle can save us. Our Savior is a book in Islam. Quote, "The Word of God in Islam is the Quran. In Christianity it is Christ. The vehicle of the divine message in Christianity is the Virgin Mary. In Islam, it is the soul of the prophet. The prophet must be unlettered for the same reason that the Virgin Mary must be virgin." End quote. There is an avant-garde intuition in Muhammad of the role of the book. And the book itself, the Quran, I wish to present to you as an avant-garde or modernist piece of literature. Indeed, if you do Hegelian type triads, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, a good one is, and Islam presents it, Moses is the religion of the law and justice. Jesus is the religion of love, and Islam is the synthesis of these two, that is, the religion of beauty. I skipped a few chapters as we don't have time and they're very confusing, more than how we are confused right now. So, we are at lecture 6, Revolutionary Islam. I draw your attention to 1071. Seljuk Turks occupy Damascus, nowadays Syria. Later, the Mongols come. The Seljuk Turks are the first of those barbaric, rough militarized invasions, military despotism, military hordes that come in and disturb the Islamic world and take over the caliphate. Now, not only do they occupy Damascus in 1071 and establish essentially a militarized caliphate, which to the Shia and establish essentially a Repeat. Now, not only do they occupy Damascus in 1071 and establish essentially a militarized caliphate, which to the Shiite is the last, is a sign of Antichrist. What you can define Sunni Islam as that branch of Islam that came to terms with Seljuk Turk caliphates. Shia Islam was on the defensive. Look back at the expansion of Fatimid Egypt, which was a Shiite Ismaili venture, and the foundation of Cairo, 1036. By 1071, Shiite Islam, Ismaili Islam, is on the defensive. And it is on the defensive in the face of the de facto alliance between Sunni Islam and the Seljuk Turk military despotism. With the help of the Seljuk Turks as their military arm, Sunni Islam reoccupies most of the territory lost to Shia Islam in its great period, which is over at the time of Nizaris get going. That's the point. The story of the Nizaris is a story of desperate resistance to a lost cause. We don't know the name Nizaris because they lost, and there were not so many, so they're the lost. Repeat, the story of the Nizaris is a story of desperate resistance to a lost cause. And it's just, the genius of Hodgson that he made that his PhD subject and came to understand it so well. What you find in the encyclopedia is something about the legendary Caesar Borgia of Islamic mysticism, Hassan Sabbah, founder of the Order of Assassins. In 1090, he seized the castle of Alamut in the mountain area south of the Caspian Sea, north of Tehran. The castle of Alamut, and in this mountain home, he obtained evil celebrity among Christian crusaders as the old man of the mountain, who spread terror through the Islamic world with his terror agents, the assassins, who did assassinate. Here is Hodgson's introduction from the Cambridge History of Iran. Earlier Western scholarship basing itself on impressions of the Crusaders as well as on the Sunni tradition was inclined to see in the Ismailis a romantically diabolic order of assassins, not quite human in their fanatical subservience to an enigmatic but self-seeking and all-powerful master, the old man of the mountain. This picture can no longer be taken seriously, but the reality that is emerging turns out to be almost as extraordinary as the legend, that this handful of villagers and small townsmen, hopelessly outnumbered, should again and again reaffirm their passionate sense of grand destiny, reformulating it in every new historical circumstance with unfailing imaginative power and persistent courage, that they should be able so to keep alive not only their own hopes, but the answering fears and covert streams of all of the Islamic world for a century and a half. This in itself is an astonishing achievement. Marshall Hodgson, The Ismaili State, The Cambridge History of Iran. Hassan, the terrible old man of the mountain, is a significant theologian in the writings of Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali is a Sunni theologian, very dominant in the Sunni world. Ghazali feels he has to deal with him very carefully. This is a purely hold out or resistance operation that they can see in political terms. And to provide the theologians foundations for that kind of political resistance, Hassan refined and absolutized the theory of authority, which was always strong in this tradition, the theory of the need for authoritative tradition. The faith becomes blind obedience. The faith is narrowed to blind obedience, so that the da'i becomes the fada'i, the assassin. And the stories of their feats and endurance and courage are indeed legendary. And the ending of the story, I think you've been patient and I'll keep the ending for another time. Or would you like me to complete the story? On the 7th day of the month Ramadan of the year 559, 8th of August 1164 CE, under the ascendary of Virgo, and when the sun was in Cancer, Hassan ordered the erection of a pulpit in the courtyard of Alamut, facing towards west, which with 4 great banners of 4 colors, white, red, yellow, and green, at the 4 corners. The people from the different regions whom he had previously summoned to Alamut were assembled in the courtyard. Those from the east on the right side, those from the west on the left side, and those from the north in front, facing the pulpit. As the pulpit faced west, the congregants had their backs toward Mecca. The congregants had their backs toward Mecca. Then, says an Ismaili tract, towards noon, it's Ramadan, and towards noon, the Lord Hassan, on his mentioned VPs, wearing a white garment and a white turban, came down from the castle, approached the pulpit from the right side, and in the most perfect manner ascended it. 3 times he uttered greetings, first those in front, then to those on the right, then to those on the left. In a moment he sat down and then rose up again, and holding his sword, spoke in a loud voice, addressing himself to the inhabitants of the worlds, jinn, men and angels, demons, men and angels. He announced that a message had come to him from the Eden Imam. With new guidance, the Imam of our time has sent you his blessing and his compassion, and has called you his special chosen servants. He has freed you from the burden of the rules of holy law Sharia, and has brought you to the resurrection. When he had completed his address, Hassan stepped down from the pulpit and performed 2 prostrations of the festival prayer. Then, a table having been laid, he invited them to break their fast, join in a banquet, and make merry. In a solemn violation of the ritual law, with their backs towards Mecca, breaking the fast of Ramadan in the noon, the message proclaimed from a pulpit facing the wrong way, with the back to Mecca, right? Now just let me spell out a little bit what happens here. Hassan is no longer a da'i, a missionary of the absent imam, but a caliph. And he is not just a caliph, but an imam. And not just an imam, but the Lord of resurrection. It is the second coming. And the dialectic of authority that goes on here ends up with a leader who is more than Pope. He is a living Buddha like the Aga Khan. It's a principle of the devotion to the Imam that the universe cannot survive without an Imam. And the most important thing is to find the Imam. Well, now under this, after the new period is announced, the Imam is no longer a guide, but is the very present object of the search. The Imam right there is the cosmic center, and to turn to Imam is to turn from appearance to reality. The Imam himself becomes the leader. The divinity of the leader is all that is left of an original conspiracy to change the world. The nature of resurrection. Paradise is now. We are this day together with him in heaven. It is a mystical or visionary reality. No more political changes are necessary. It is all in our imagination, or as they said, quote, mental things all alone, repeat, mental things alone are real, end quote, from A Vision of the Last Judgment, 565. It is a spiritual triumph over historical defeat. From politics to metapolitics, on the 8th of August, 1164 AD. From politics to metapolitics may be the story of my life. Or if not me, what has happened to radical convictions in the history of my generation is given a strange new light, it seems to me, if considered in the light of what happened in the 11th and 12th century. The revolution of the saints was pioneered by the Prophet Muhammad. Islam was a decision to break the stalemated confrontation between prophet and king in the Old Testament, between Caesar and Christ in the New, to take responsibility, to seize power. History is cycle of prophecy. Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. The one true spirit of prophecy recurs. Verus propheta per secula recurrens. History is also cycles of eschatological theophany, presided over by the one true spirit of gnosis identified with Melchizedek, to whom Abraham submitted, Chesr, to whom Moses submitted, and Ali, now elevated above Muhammad. History is cycles of theophany, alternating between manifestation and occultation, outward conformity and spiritual liberation, resurrection and decay. The full resurrection will come only at the end of the millennial period introduced by the sixth world prophet, Muhammad. But within the cycle of Muhammad, there could be anticipatory foretastes of the final resurrection, such as the exhilarating moment of 17 Ramazan 1164 CE, or Paris in the spring of 1964. With its absurd Gnostic slogan, all power to the imagination. The Quranic commitment of Islam to docetism, to epiphany rather than incarnation, as the mode of divine operation on earth, extrapolated into the Shia notion of the occultation of the hidden divine, becomes a flexible instrument of historical realization and political analysis. To illustrate the flexibility, one has to wrench the preteen ingenuity of Islamic sectarianism. The Zaydi Shia rejected the notion of hereditary succession to the imamate. There is no unbroken series of imams. There can be an age without an imam. There can be rival imams, incompletely realized imams, imams of war, or imams of learning only. Another sect recognized different types of imams corresponding to the 4 states or ways in which the community can face its enemies. The state of manifestation, when the community was strong enough to overcome the enemy. The state of defense, when it could merely hold up resisting. The state of self-sacrifice, when a small group of believers choose uprising and martyrdom. And the state of concealment, and when the believers were forced to live under the rule of the enemy and practice dissimulation. It is, as Ali Shariati has emphasized, a world of existentialists rather than Marxist politics. Political action springs from the free will to demonstrate, to manifest in the unfathomable obscurity of historical circumstance, the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Thank you for your time. If I want to chat off on that is that, well, we got the chance from W139 to do an intervention during these 2 months. And it was just by the time that Wilders had labored on Moroccans less or Moroccans more. And then I thought, well, this is also something that I'm busy with for 2 years, reading Brown. And I'm born Muslim, and I'm born Shia, and I'm born Iranian. And I have lived here 3 years. And being Europeanist, even when I was living in Iran, I found it through Brown. The most remote parts of my brain, being Freud and Khomeini, and I thought sharing and reading these and also telling because in the beginning I said about the two last books of him, the most important books, Life Against Death and The Lost Body, which I was totally in love with. And then when I realized that at some point of his life, he realized without learning Islam or knowing Islam, we will be not able to understand our Western tradition. Then I thought, well, I have to share this with some people who are gallery goers, who are into culture, into understanding what is happening in their society or in themselves. But I can continue talking about that for 1 more hour too. So.
Yeah, then what I hear is, let's see how I put it, that it is very male dominated. There is not talking about one woman.
True,
so,
because the
so
history
so I think if you want to understand, if we all want really to understand society, you have to include them.
Sure, totally true. But then again, you are the best example of it. As Christelle says, what does a woman want cannot be answered by men, but unless a woman says, what does she want? And the history of Islam and Christianity and Judaism is in no way written by any woman. But Brown himself, of course, brings a lot of narration and attention to women, femininity, and feminism, but not specifically in this book, because this is a book researching in history of a part which is totally male-dominated.
No, but you were saying that you need to understand this to understand Western society, and then I think the world is a little bit bigger.
Of course it is bigger. Of course it's bigger. Of course we are talking about feminism so much as we can, but one of the things that I think we talk less about Islam than talking about women. And I don't think that we have to put any priority. I personally believe women's rights is the forefront and the most important thing for every human liberating action. It must be the foremost, the pioneering. It was always, it will be, personally. But well, this was limited to this specific subject of Islam that was also as repressed as women, or as gays, or as lesbians, or as people of color, or, you know.
But in the Islam tradition, there is Islam not suppressed, but the women are suppressed.
The tradition of Islam and the text of Islam and the things that happen in history are different. So yes, you are right. Women in many Muslim world, in many parts of the Muslim world are suppressed, but women in many parts of the, at least Shia history, were not suppressed. There were again in, like we read about Imam. Imam being the leader. Imam is the Arabic word for leader. There are a lot of examples of female imams in Iran throughout history who were teachers not only to women but also mainly men and women. And there are hundreds of Muslim women in history. I think it's not fair to say Islam tradition is suppressing women. The whole patriarchic tradition is suppressing women as much as Islam does too. But I totally feel you and I totally hear you.
It would be a revolution if you would give lectures about women who who are imam, because that we really never did.
Well, that's a very good idea, but also, I think when I was in Tehran specifically, I was very busy asking people to lecture or organizing lectures or lecturing myself on feminism, because honestly, I find Islam less interesting than feminism. My main interest is feminism and LGBTQ, queer in general. But yeah, again, according to what was happening in the Netherlands and the opportunity I had here for a limited time, I thought it might be interesting if we pay attention to Islam in a way which we do not hear every day in the mainstream media, or to think why we people who are considered as a part of the links hobby, this is the links hobby apparently, who are talking about all these different things, never consider Islam into account. As well, of course, I mean, there is no question we have to take the question of women into account, but Islam too. Not Islam which is suppressing women, but Islam as a cultural accomplishment of a part of history and the world. But I totally agree. It is not ever enough for me to say how much I feel in debt to feminism and women who have ever been always influential in my life, and all I learned about Islam. And I was a very lucky person that most of my professors, my teachers, my trainers were always women. So I can't say anything, even and outside.
It would be nice if you will start the next lecture with telling this, and then you can tell about all these men.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I totally agree with you.
Okay.
Thank you for your comment.
I was wondering, I'm not sure if I missed it because I was writing it down. At one point you were saying that when you were reading, that it's not a goal to abolish war, but to find a real war. And
I can read that sentence to you again. To find the true war, the war which, and I told you this love study was not as logical talking. I mean, there are so many things in love study that if I read, you would just kill me, because it's not only anti-women, but it's also anti-humanity in the way it is. We have to read it poetically. The thing then is not to abolish war, but to find the true war. Open the hidden heart in wars of mutual benevolence, wars of love. So if we make, as much as I understand so far from Brown in general and psychoanalysis, that if we think that it is inevitable for human beings to make war, then our only option is to transcend the war from the physical level to a symbolic level. So we make a war here on ideals, for example, or we make war of love, or but this is a gesture, a very romantic, sentimental gesture, which I love very much, of love. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.